Greetings, fellow winos. Today I'm going to give you some tips on how to get the most out of your wine, how to make sure you're enjoying it as the wine was intended to by the people that made it. The most important thing is serving wine at the right temperature. Wines that are served too hot will be jammy, kind of bitter and extra tannic. Wines that are served too cold will be thin, acidic, and flavorless. And if you've been having these problems, I'm going to tell you how to fix it. It's really easy. The basic system is what I call the rule of 20. If you've brought your wines home from the grocery store, they've been sitting on the shelf at whatever amounts to room temperature in your part of the world, you probably will need to refrigerate them. Whites, of course, you're naturally going to put them in the refrigerator, but even a red wine may need a little refrigeration. If it's been sitting at, say, 75 degrees or something like that, put it in the refrigerator for 20 minutes. You'll be glad you did. It turns out that when people say red wine should be served at room temperature, the room temperature that they're referring to is a room in England or northern France back 150 years ago, when it would probably be more like what we now consider cellar temperature, like 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The other rule, of course, is you've had your white wine in the fridge for however long, 24 hours, maybe you got it a couple days ago, whatever. You want to pull that baby out, wait around 20 minutes again to let that wine warm up to about the mid-50s or so. Ice cold white wine, unless it's a really super hot day and you really don't care what it tastes like, it's just not going to give the wine the full benefit. That's a very simple rule of 20. Put your reds in for 20 minutes, take your whites out for 20 minutes before serving. Red wine has two properties that require special treatment or special consideration. The first is, when they're young, they tend to be tannic to an extent that can interfere, quite frankly, with the full enjoyment of the wine. The way you can treat that, at least a little bit, or moderate it, is to decant the wine. Get yourself a nice little decanter. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. The main thing is that it should be relatively wide so that it can expose the wine to air. They talk about this as breathing. What it really is mixing a little oxygen into the wine that will promote some chemical reactions that will somewhat improve the flavors of a young red wine. The other characteristic that red wines have that requires a little extra treatment is that as they age, they tend to throw off a little bit of particulate matter, particularly after they get 5 or so. If you've got a red wine sitting around that you've been saving for a special occasion, there's a good chance that it may have started to throw off some crust. That's another good reason to decant a bottle of wine. You don't need a candle, just a bright light above and a white paper underneath will be more than adequate for you to be able to see exactly when the crust starts to come out of the bottom of the bottle. You might want to stand it up for a little while before you decant it, just to make sure all the sediment is down at the very bottom. But even then, that isn't really necessary as long as you're holding the bottle gently and people aren't, picking it up and throwing it around. Now, if the wine is exceptionally old, say 15, 20, 25 years or more, or if it's a particularly light red, like a Pinot Noir, a very nice old Burgundy or something like that, you probably don't even want to decant it. What you want to do instead is put it in something like this, a nice cradle, so that it will just kind of lay on its side. You'll agitate it at the very least when you pick it up and pour it, so the crust will tend to just kind of stay down near the bottom all by itself. That way you don't expose the wine unnecessarily to oxygen, and hopefully we'll get the full spectrum of flavors and aromas and all the wonderful things that are hidden in a really nicely aged glass of red wine. The best way to know whether your old red wine needs decanting is to pour yourself a little glass. Have a taste. If it seems really full and rich and in your face and maybe even a touch dry and tannic in the back, yeah, okay, go ahead and decant that puppy. If it's just wonderfully evolved and perfumey and soft and just really all right where you think it needs to be, put it in the cradle. I'm now going to go through this decision-making process myself. Why don't you watch? This is a very nice Napa Cabernet Sauvignon from Spotswood, vintage 1999, about 15 years old. Better find out which way it should go, into the decanter or the cradle. And now the moment of truth. Just a little bit here, don't need much. And of course you want to agitate the bottle to as little as possible. Keep that crust where it belongs. Ooh. Wow. Well, this could be a tough call. Maybe a photo finish. I'm going to go with the cradle. This wine is absolutely at its peak of perfection. I wish I could share a glass with you, friends. Until next time, salute.